classic matchup for you at the 2-0 bracket right now.
Yeah, classic as far as the store patrons go, because we have Resident Brewer Bismon and that 5-color control deck we just talked about a little bit earlier going up against Frenchie and their Rakdos Demons deck, which has a little bit of a twist, and no, it's not the frozen overhead camera again. Frenchie's version of Rakdos Demons has the standard demon affair, but is running a different demon to help trigger that Unholy Annex in Abyssal Harvester.
Oh no, not the Abyssal Harvester. There's another guy at the store who keeps talking to me about the Abyssal Harvester, and it looks okay, but I think it's a little too fragile for the format.
I mean, this thing is a demon. That's the best part about it, because it makes your Unholy Annex drain, but then you can also just wind up recurring things from your graveyard. As we did wind up seeing just Fable the Mirror Breaker pitching two... was that Fable the Mirror Breaker pitching 2 FOMOs? Or is that... Oh, I think it was FOMO pitching FOMO, and it got fatal push by Bismon.
Yeah, and then... That's Fable's Exiled?
That was a Vanishing Verse coming down from Bismon on Frenchie's end step. Bismon, the 5-color control deck, having perfect mana with Concealed Courtyard and Blossoming... sorry, what the heck is... Oh, Razorverge Thicket. Yeah. But,
and then, was it Rafine's Tower?
Yeah, so we have Esperland, Selesnya, and Orzhov all playing in harmony, although not all basic land types. Bismon's deck doesn't really care about domain. It's not really running Leyline Binding in that affair, but it's running Niv-Mizzet Supreme and a bunch of dual-colored cards to Jumpstart.
Once again, a Vanishing Verse coming down on the Fable. Just prevent Frenchie from being able to loot for value. And what do you think Frenchie actually has to deal with this Niv-Mizzet Supreme?
Well, it has hexproof from monocolor, I believe. It might wind up being, yeah, I think it's hexproof from monocolor. So that means that all of the, like, the Bitter Triumph, Go for the Throat style removal spells from Frenchie's side don't work. And you can't even, like, stack up multiple Torch the Towers or anything. All of those don't work. So unless Frenchie is running something along the lines of like Molten Collapse in their deck, I don't think that they're going to have a hard answer for it, and they'll need to have like a Sheoldred's Edict type effect instead.
Here comes down the card you were talking about earlier, Abyssal Harvester. 3 mana, 3/2, with a pretty scary effect.
Yeah, so this is basically going to give you like a short-term reanimation spells. You exile the creature from your graveyard if it was put there this turn. So these Fable the Mirror Breaker, these FOMOs, all those sort of effects are going to help Frenchie enable the Abyssal Harvester to cheaply reanimate something. You don't actually get the card back. You make a copy of it, and you only can keep one of these at a time, but you keep it until it dies. So you don't necessarily care about exiling a Sheoldred if you have a Sheoldred that just sticks for 0 mana.
Ooh, actually, we're about to see something cool around the Abyssal Harvester. So it is any creature in any graveyard, and Bismon is now facing his Niv-Mizzet Supreme on the other side.
I don't think Frenchie's going to be able to get actual like value out of this card as far as the Jumpstart portion of it goes, but stealing your opponent's like namesake card or the way that the card actually makes your deck function is pretty funny. You can't have hexproof from monocolored from your graveyard, so I guess we figured out the way Frenchie deals with it.
Notably, I don't think Bismon actually has perfect mana, seeing that he has some Deafening Clarions in his hand and unable to cast it with his current mana, I believe.
I think it's Deafening Clarion, Ionize, and I'm not quite sure what the card is in between the two. But Bismon, yeah, can't find the mana and is just staring down in the face of double-digit damage only at 12.
Oops, got Thought Seized and then reanimated on. Well, that was a pretty good showing from Abyssal Harvester.
Yeah, how do you feel about that one now, Brandon?
Outlier. All right. And going to the boards. What do you think Rakdos Demons brings in this matchup?
So knowing that Bismon is on a control version of this Niv-Mizzet deck, and even in the case of like a Niv to light deck in general, you are going to only have a certain amount of creature spells from the Niv deck, or the control deck in this case. So bringing in things like Duress, Go Blank, those types of discard effects is actually very effective against what the 5-color deck is doing. We saw in Bismon's hand there multiple copies of Deafening Clarion, and we saw Ionize as well as the counter spell of choice since it's multicolor. You can expect Bismon to also have either No More Lies or Dovin's Veto in his list because of the multicolor capabilities. So you turn your Niv-Mizzet Supreme into a Snapcaster Mage sort of effect. So Frenchie's going to be bringing in a lot of hand disruption. If Frenchie has any of those edict effects in their sideboard, that's also probably going to be coming in because the Niv deck is not running a ton of creatures, and if it is, it's making tokens. So Sheoldred's Edict making them sacrifice a non-token creature will be very powerful.
All right. We'll see what Bismon brings in too. I am kind of expecting more removal for Frenchie's stuff, but he does get 2-for-1 on a lot of these things. Because Fable the Mirror Breaker, classically, 2-for-1s, 3-for-1ing everyone.
I want to say that Bismon was running Deadly Cover-Up last week or 2 weeks ago. I'm not entirely sure if that's the right matchup. There was another multicolor deck that was running it, so I'm not sure if it was Bismon's deck or I'm confusing it for another one on stream. But bringing in board wipes or things that can kind of help break up the slower matchup where Frenchie's going to definitely have more of a board presence will definitely help. Bringing in more removal spells, like you said, there's already Fatal Pushes that we saw in the deck and Vanishing Verse. If there are any kind of backup removal spells, like maybe Get Lost, and I'm trying to just think of other multicolored removal spells and kind of drawing a blank outside of like Molten Collapse or Abrupt Decay is something that Bismon probably has in his sideboard, which works against Abyssal Harvester specifically, works against Fable the Mirror Breaker, and I think the only thing it can't hit from Frenchie's deck is Sheoldred.
That's pretty good if you're able to hit everything but Sheoldred. Also, was that card Fracture I've seen part in play? I'm not sure.
Oh, the Orzhov removal
Orzhov,
spell, right?
yeah.
I think I want Fragment. No, Fragmentize is the one white spell. So the problem with this was I know exactly the spell that you're talking about, and like it has like the person with the cracked glass and everything. The only problem is I own the Japanese version of the card, so of course, much like a great person, I don't know what the card actually was named, but yeah, artifact, enchantment, or planeswalker. Unfortunately, it doesn't hit creatures. It still deals with things like Fable the Mirror Breaker, Unholy Annex, but I'm not really banking on this one coming out of the sideboard. I'd be like more in the line of if Bismon is playing similarly to the way that Niv to Light lists do, I wouldn't be surprised if Thought Distortion came in.
Ooh, that's a good one. Just yank everything out of Frenchie's hand.
Yeah, basically. Like you leave Frenchie with lands and like that. Or is it non-creature, non-land? Is that what Thought Distortion is?
Yeah.
Which means that like Frenchie is going to be left with basically just a bunch of creatures where if you're bringing in multiple removal spells, then yeah, that winds up becoming like a way to just leave Frenchie with nothing.
Notably also Graveyard Hay, in case Frenchie has any recursive kind of thing.
Yeah, I think the other thing that you kind of need to consider from Bismon is, are your removal spells going to be enough to deal with what Frenchie has on the board? Because there is always that the delirium factor coming out from having FOMO in these lists, so you can just wind up having multiple combat steps, and if you have a FOMO and a Flip Fable the Mirror Breaker, it's Splinter Twin for as many mana as you have.
Alrighty, well, Bismon's still thinking about his sideboard here, it seems like. Alright. Frenchie's done. Let's see what he's thinking about. Maybe a few more cards here and there.
Looks like we are unfortunately still having a little bit of issues with our camera when we're switching scenes. So you may see it blink on and off just a little bit, but thankfully we can see the player's hands and we know when the camera's frozen or not. Last round it was actually a little disturbing because of how still Charles and Matt Ju were on camera. I thought that they froze at some point in time, knowing that we've had issues so far today.
Alrighty, getting into it. Looks like Frenchie's on a mull to 6.
Yep, so on the draw, not awful. You're basically having a 7-card hand as is, but of course, if you're thinking that Bismon may be bringing in any sort of disruptive elements or playing counter magic too, we mentioned Ionize is in Bismon's deck, but also Dovin's Veto or No More Lies. Being on the draw against those effects is very bad unless, you have these duresses here.
And here comes the duress.
Oh, Bloodtithe Thirst.
She's Thirst. Alright, just additional Fatal Push-esque cards for Bismon.
I like the Bloodtithe Thirst as well in a slower deck like Bismon's, because this is also going to be something that at 4 mana can just deal with any threat from Frenchie's side. Doesn't only have to be FOMOs and anything, but it lets the Fatal Pushes and stuff last till later in the game if they need to, by just being a sorcery speed Fatal Push for those FOMOs, or if Frenchie is playing them like Bloodtithe Harvester cards.
And what was that? Frenchie looks like he took the, was that Ionize?
Yeah, it takes the Ionize. It's either that or the Bloodtithe Thirst, and this kind of points to me saying that Frenchie has a hand that either has Unholy Annex or Fable the Mirror Breaker in it, and we do see that Fable right in the middle.
Yep. And Bismon just playing his land stab. No need to shock them in, hold up. Mana.
Frenchie with the awkwardest castle lockcoin in the world, where you play it coming to play tap because you play a non-basic land type card.
Oh, I know how that feels. It's kind of terrible. But yeah, Bismon copying, just playing, nice and slow. Put lands into play tap. No need to take damage. And here comes down the Fable from Frenchie's side.
It's Fable the Mirror Breaker off of a Mutavault. Can't get rid of the Fable with a Bloodtithe Thirst, unfortunately. But if there's a Vanishing Verse off the top, or any sort of Abrupt Decay like we were talking about from Bismon's side, that might get popped here. But nope, just playing another land tapped. And just going to get... Oh, okay, yeah, there's the Abrupt Decay. Nice. All right, good job us. We figured it out. But now the downside to this is that Bismon is playing entirely face-up, including, well, there is this Niv-Mizzet Reborn, which is the other Niv-Mizzet, which will be able to restock his hand if he can just successfully cast it next turn. And I don't think Frenchie, unless there's a Thoughtseize, has a way to deal with that.
And Frenchie just dropping down the Unholy Annex. We're playing another tapped Castle Locklane. Still no swamps on the side of Frenchie. And if that's what I believe a stomping ground, is that a Verge?
No, it's what comes into play untapped as long as you have 2 or more lands. That cycle.
Okay.
I forget what.
Rockfell.
Yeah,
Village.
Rockfell Village. Yeah, thank you.
All right. And this is one I'm guessing Niv-Mizzet Reborn basically Traxa before Traxa existed in these kind of decks. And putting what, a Teferi?
It's a Teferi, a Vanishing Verse, and is that a Notion Thief?
Oh no.
Oh, baby.
So this is an attack from my blue-black decks, but classically, if you're all 5 colors, you just play a blue-black card. And this card is a house against Unholy Annex decks.
Yeah, this card right here basically says you don't get to draw that card. I get to draw that card. And if you don't have a demon, you're just draining yourself for 2 life. But Frenchie does have the Mutavault, and this follow-up Duress is actually going to be able to snag Teferi, but it can't snag the Notion Thief, nor can it deal with the Niv Reborn already on the battlefield. So there's this giant 6/6 dragon on the battlefield. There's a looming threat of removing pretty much that, Unholy Annex with the Vanishing Verse in hand, and then this Notion Thief that even if Bismon chooses not to remove the Unholy Annex, can shut off the card engine from Frenchie's side, but will still give them a bit of life buffer from this drain effect.
Notably, if Frenchie cannot crack this blood while Bismon has this kind of mana up for the Notion Thief, because it will also stop the blood from drawing our card.
That's true.
Yeah. But nicely on Frenchie's side, he has basically face-up removal for this Notion Thief if Bismon goes to cast it for the Annex trigger. With the the guy who makes the blood again?
The Bloodtithe Harvester?
Yeah, Bloodtithe
The one
Harvester.
downside, though, is that the Bloodtithe Harvester can only be activated as a sorcery.
Oh.
So it would have to be at some point before the end step. which I don't think Bismon is going to wind up doing.
Oh. I
So-
forgot about that.
Yeah, that's the one downside to Bloodtithe Harvester. Oh no, it's a aggressively two-cost, higher power removal spell on a stick that can also be a card velocity engine. It can't tap at instant speed. Wah. I thought that card was such a problem card in Pioneer for so long. I'm happy that it's kind of settled back into the background, but even in a list that's centered around demons and playing things like FOMO to get extra combat steps, it's still the best thing you could be doing.
Ooh, that's a really good thought seize from Refugee side. Might force out the Notion Thief right here, and then he can, or they can just kill it with the Harvester.
Yeah, we forgot to mention that there was a swing for 6 off of that Niv-Mizzet Reborn, so Frenchie wound up going down to 14. Now, Bismon, like you said, do we Notion Thief right now, which can then get Bloodtithe Harvestered, or do we Vanishing Verse and get rid of the Unholy Annex, in which case we don't really care about the Notion Thief getting eaten by this Thought Seize.
Yep.
Who's got chicken in the background? That's making me hungry.
I'm also hungry. All right. Bismon thinking pretty hard about this, whether or not he wants to let the Notion Thief go or not.
Fortunately, I do think our camera froze again, so hopefully, all right, we are still considering. Okay, maybe the camera didn't freeze because everything is still the way it was before. I just saw Frenchie's hands moving and nothing moving on the battlefield, so.
Yep. All right. Looks like Bismon's going to cast.
I think there's an Ionize underneath the, in between the Notion Thief. Oh, no, that's just the Notion Thief there.
Sure. Thoughtseize is still on the stack. Thoughtseize is still on the stack.
Yeah. And I'm responding with the Harvester too.
Oh,
But I double check this if they don't.
Sorcery speed, right?
Yeah, okay, so they got
Alright,
it. Okay.
they got it. Yeah.
I was like, they figured it out as well.
Thoughtseize is still on the stack.
Okay.
I will.
Bismon has another response.
Yeah, it looks like thinking about this Vanishing Verse, because I think it's a Blood Chief's Thirst, and oh, Abrupt Decay. Okay, so Bismon has all sorts of removal spells available to him.
I'll take the.
Interesting. Instead of killing the Bloodtithe Harvester, Bismon just goes for the Annex. What do you think about that?
I think that Bismon is thinking that Frenchie has more likely a removal spell in hand as opposed to something else to deal with. So having that Notion Thief just die to the Bloodtithe Harvester removes something from Frenchie's side of the battlefield. But unfortunately for Bismon, it's going to just be a follow-up Unholy Annex from Frenchie, which makes getting rid of the first one not as great, as he just have this. They do have this Mutavault here to just drain back 2 more life from that Thought Seize.
Luckily, Bismon is on the beatdown plan right now with his, what is that? The Niv-Mizzet Reborn?
Yeah, so he does still have a giant 6/6 flying dragon. Let's not forget about that. And Mutavault, despite having all creature types, can't jump. The one thing that Frenchie can do is create a demon off of the Ritual Chamber half, but Bloodchief's Thirst cares about converted mana costs, so that demon will just die, but Invoke Despair coming out from Frenchie is huge. This draws Frenchie 2 cards, domes Bismon for 4, and deals with that Niv-Mizzet cleanly.
Wow. Really clean. There's a really big value swing for Frenchie right there, and Bismon just only drawing lands as we speak.
If Bismon had that Notion Thief, would have drawn those cards instead. So maybe regretting the decision to get rid of the Unholy Annex instead of getting rid of that Bloodtithe Harvester in this specific interaction, but Bismon can't tell the future, so I think getting rid of the Unholy Annex, assuming that Frenchie had mostly removal in their deck, is a good follow-up line, and having the answer to a Ritual Chamber Demon is also just a solid way to go about it. But unfortunately now for Bismon, he spent so many of his resources in that trade that Frenchie draws cards off Unholy Annex, drew 2 cards off of that Invoke Despair, and Bismon just has that face-up Bloodchief's Thirst in hand, so he's now behind in cards despite being so far ahead in them.
Yeah. And notably, Bloodchief's Thirst being a sorcery, not very helpful against this constant drain from the Mutavault.
Yeah, unfortunately, we did have our camera freeze because I was like, our Bismon should have drawn a card at some point. So, drew an Abrupt Decay, had the Bloodtithe Thirst, gets rid of the Abyssal Harvester that Frenchie wound up playing, but there's also a Fable of the Mirror Breaker, so Bismon going after the Unholy Annex instead, realizing that that drain and that clock is going to be more important than the Fable of the Mirror Breaker, drawing and discarding up to 2 cards from Frenchie's side. So even though Bismon is stuck being empty-handed here, if he just top decks, you know, a Teferi, another Niv-Mizzet, one of the powerful haymakers in his deck, he's going to be sitting okay with Frenchie having just this token on the battlefield.
Righty. Let's see if Bismon can top deck one of his big haymakers right now. I think a Niv-Mizzet Supreme would be pretty good, or another Niv-Mizzet Reborn.
I think you need Niv Reborn at this point because Niv Supreme uses Jumpstart as its way to get things back, and you have no cards in hand right now.
Trigger.
Frenchie dropping another Harvester, just keeping up the pressure with small guys. But that Fable's about to flip too. Yeah, it's not looking good for Bismon.
Yeah, Bismon could top deck something like another Niv and be okay, but he's not in a great spot at this point in time. And Frenchie just playing this army of 2-drops after Bismon wound up playing tons of removal to get rid of 2 and 3 drop things. There's 3 Abrupt Decays in that graveyard. There's 2 copies of Bloodtithe Thirst, I believe, that were cast this game. And there's still that Vanishing Verse that got used earlier as well. So Bismon is like, Board Wipe might actually be the best spell right now.
Yeah, maybe an Extinction Event or a Daily Cover-Up. Ooh, here's was it Elenda, the one new one from Foundation.
Oh, the vampire, right?
Yeah, it's a hexproof from instance and lifelink, and then it has a lot of text if you have more life than 20. But
Does it right now.
I mean, a 4/4 lifelink hexproof from instance is quite nice here.
Now, the big thing is, if Frenchie has Delirium here, this could just be... it can't be lethal unless there's a removal spell, because Frenchie will get an additional attack step. Okay, well, there's a removal spell in the face-up, a Bloodtithe Harvester right there. So now, Frenchie can attack for 4, untap, and then attack for 2 more. So if there's an Unholy Annex to drain or something, that's lights out.
Oh, actually...
Trigger, untap.
Oh, no, the Fable just came.
Yeah, unfortunately, you can't give haste with your FOMO, like untapping, quote-unquote, untapping your Fable the Mirror Breaker reflection or something like that.
Wait, Bismon went to 2. I do believe Frenchie was able to activate his Mutable there still.
Frenchie could have activated Mutable. It looks like we all missed that.
Oh, huh. Well,
All right, you got it.
see if, oh, nope. Just draws the land. Unfortunate for Bismon.
Yeah, having that Mutavault sitting there too, even board wipe at that point in time wasn't enough for Bismon because you need a board wipe and instant speed removal spell to deal with the Mutavault the following turn, whereas Frenchie just was able to. Yeah, there it is, Brandon. Abyssal Harvester.
Don't shove that in my face. No.